Where can I see it on the Is that, can we make that bigger? All right, thank you, Governor. So I got the technological goes out of the way. My name is Ryan Maness. I'm a visiting fellow of Security and Resilience Policy at Northeastern University. I'm here to talk about, are we entering an era of cyber peace? Question mark. Are we or are we not? And then a shameless plug of my book with Oxford University Press if you're interested in reading about my empirical work on cyber conflict at the turn of the century. So let's start. So basically the year 2015, as we see with the media and with government officials, it's like a real breakout year for high-profile damaging cyber actions like the Sony hack, the OPM attacks, the IRS, and even Ashley Madison. But basically this idea is that cyber conflict is prevalent and normal, according to the data that we collect, kind of flies against all evidence from a macro perspective. When you look at all of the cyber incidents in the international system and collect them from a macro point of view, that these overt cyber incidents are somewhat rare, and we're seeing maybe more low-level cyber incidents for the most part. So on the contrary, we're finding that there's a developing cyber norm against the use of severe cyber tactics. I'm talking cyber weaponry, like cyber espionage and things like that. We'll get to that soon. So perception is really not reality, and we're entering a relative stable era of cyber peace. And then let me clarify what I mean by cyber peace. So borrowing from John Galton, who kind of delineated what negative and positive peace is, negative peace basically refers to the absence of violence. That's what we're seeing in the cyber domain right now. We're not seeing cyber escalate into the military domain where if somebody with a cyber attack is being responded to with a military response. We're seeing relatively isolated incidents of cyber incidents where retaliation has really not become a part of the normal relations between states. So positive peace is built with positive content, such as restoration of relationships, the creation of social systems that serve the needs of the whole population, and the constructive resolution of conflict. This is what we need to move towards in the cyber domain. I think that's what the goal of this conference is to move to a more positive peace. So right now, cyber conflict is in an era of negative peace, and states should strive towards positive peace. Okay? So we like to self-identify ourselves in academia. So right now, in the cybersecurity field, at least in political science and the social sciences, we've been labeled as either cyber prognosticators or cyber skeptics. The prognosticators, those that think that cyber is going to be a revolution in military affairs, it's going to change the whole way we think about international interactions, versus the cyber skeptics, those that take a more skeptical view. I like to put myself in the middle of the road, so when I say we, I'm talking about my co-author, Brandon Valeriano of the University of Glasgow. We assert that there could be a middle point of view, what can be framed as cyber moderation, and that's what we like to identify ourselves. And here's a quote from the book where we say, cyber conflict will occur, but the conflicts themselves will be trivial, will not result in a change in behavior of the target, and will largely be regional cyber incidents connected to traditional international issues at stake between states. And actually that's what we find for the most part in the empirical world, that a lot of these cyber disputes between countries are over that states are usually involved in. Most states are rivals. Most states that are rivals are neighbors, and most states that have disputes are territorial disputes. So a lot of this cyber is propagandist reactions to the normal disputes that you see usually. But we're not saying we're very skeptical of cyber technology, that it's not going to be something that we need to worry about. We're just worried about the research. We're skeptical of hyperbolic. We're just skeptical of research that have hyperbolic announcements that there is a cyber revolution and cyber power will change the international interactions. So we're kind of taking this middle ground. Cyber is a problem, yes. Is cyber a problem so much that we need to worry about it to the point where we think we're going to go to war over it? So let me show you what I mean with the evidence that we collected. So basically, I come from the International Relations School of Thought and Political Science. One of my mentors is John Maness at the University of Illinois. So why does any of this matter? Basically, the cyber prognosticators tries to marginalize and paint the most important challengers as simply out of touch and unreasonable. That people like me who kind of are somewhat skeptical about cyber weaponry being the next big thing when it comes to international conflict aren't really being reasonable about the future of international interactions. So I posit three hypotheses. Hypothesis one would be, while we are witnessing a rise in cyber conflict, there's no precipitous increase in the severity of cyber incidents. And I use this with my data set. I've collected all cyber incidents between states from 2001 to 2011. I have updated it till 2014. It's being reviewed right now by my peers, so that will be released soon. But right now, I only have cyber incidents for 2011. Hypothesis two is actors are restrained from responding to cyber incidents. Basically, when somebody is hit by a cyber attack or a cyber incident, the retaliatory response is little to none. And then hypothesis three, which I think is going to be an issue that we need to discuss today, definitely, because that's what Z and Obama, I'm sure, are discussing today. A great proportion of cyber actions are falling in the domain of espionage in the form of stealing. As we all know, China's hacking into our systems a lot and stealing a lot of our intellectual property, and that's something that we definitely need to address. So like my mentor Vasquez, we believe that political and international relations theory should be able to explain the past, the present, and the future. So what evidence do I have of cyber peace? Well, the fact is there have been no major attacks between countries that have risen to any serious level of nature where the chances of armed conflict break out. Obviously, there's exceptions to this rule. The closest we've had is when Russia used the option against Georgia, which Russia did have a cyber operation along with its military campaign in the 5-day conflict with Georgia. But as far as how tied that was to military operations and their military tactics that Russia launched on Georgia and South Ossetia is really shaky ground. Also with Estonia, when the Bronze Soldier dispute happened, when Estonia moved a grave marker to outside the center square of Tallinn, it was responded to in kind with a barrage of cyber attacks that shut down a lot of government and private networks where Estonians really couldn't conduct their daily lives because Estonians are really plugged in the country. And then when Iran used it against Saudi Arabia in 2012, it's known as the Shamoon attack, where wiper malware pretty much wiped out all the data on Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil company, which caused about a week or two's worth of disruption, but oil production was able to continue. And then probably the most overt one was when the United States used the Stuxnet virus against Iran, roughly from 2007 to 2011. So these examples outweigh the volumes of other observations. Like I said, I take a macro view. I collect all cyber incidents between states, failing to effectively use cyber or states utilizing methods to probe potential vulnerabilities, but really going no further. So what we are seeing in the international system is a whole lot of rain in the form of cyber attacks, but no wind, no sleet in the form of cyber destruction, no violence. We have negative things. So we're seeing a lot of disruption, deception, and evidence. Disruption being the denial of service, DDoS attacks that we see all the time happening to a lot of countries when it comes to their networks being shut down. Deception, a lot of website basements, a lot of propaganda launched against each other. And then I think what's the most important thing we need to look at is the cyber espionage and how that's kind of run wild so far. So based on my data set, this is what we've seen since basically the turn of the century. We see that cyber incidents, and for the most part, are on the rise. We see more and more and more of them every year. But as far as how severe they are, and we can talk severity scales after the talk, if you probably speed this up. Basically, we're seeing rise in cyber attacks, but no rise in severity. And as you can see, the most attacks are either espionage, disruption, or deception. So we posit a theory of cyber restraint as opposed to cyber deterrence. So restraint is the strategic underpinning of how many states confront cyber actions. So David Sanger, who writes on cyber all the time in the New York Times, basically saying, and this is true with the OPM attack, in a series of classified media among options that range from largely symbolic responses like sanctions The more significant actions in some official Europe could lead to an escalation of the hacking conflict between the two countries, talking about what should the United States do to China about the OPM hack. We don't really know, and as we all know, Obama's still pondering what to do. So maybe there's going to be some constructive talks coming out of what happens today. I know he's talking to him pretty much all day today. So even some of the most cantankerous states in the system tend to behave in a responsible manner for the most part. So why is there restraint in cyberspace? Well, the overt cyber weapons that people launch against each other, like Stuxnet, can be reproduced. Once you launch a cyber attack against another country, they can study it. They can study the forensics, and they can either shore up their defenses against this type of weapon, or they can replicate it and throw it back at you. So we've seen this with as a response to Stuxnet and what's called Operation Cleaver coming out of Iran. We've never seen any kind of this technology coming out of Iran. They've been hitting Saudi Arabia, they've been hitting Israel, and they've been hitting the United States. A lot of this has come after the revelation of the Stuxnet work, meaning that they've got the technology. We gave them this technology. Also, these cyber weapons like Stuxnet are not simple to design. Stuxnet took years to develop and took millions of dollars and a lot of resources. We're talking about these overt cyber weapons. It takes a lot of resources to design these types of things. Also, there's the chances of collateral damage. Cyber is not really containable. Cyber can spread into other networks. It can affect a lot of civilians, and therefore, when there are civilians affected, that demands an escalatory response. So that's another reason why we might see restraint in cyberspace. Also, the high potential for diffusion of the conflict, because, like I said, viruses spread into other networks. Even Stuxnet was launched into an air-gapped network, but it still got out into other countries. So not everything can be contained. And then finally, blowback, since cyber weapons used to great effect, like Stuxnet, will demand repercussions. And we've seen responses from Iran since Stuxnet. Iran has been launching cyber incidents against the United States and its allies as a response to Stuxnet virus. So restraint in action, what I'm talking about here is state-to-state cyber incidents and then how states have responded. So 87 or 78% of the data collected, we see no response when states are victims of cyber attacks. 17, you see a cyber response in kind. Only 7, you see maybe a militarized response, a militarized interstate response. Not a military attack, some sort of escalated rhetoric or maybe even movement of military forces. That's only 6% of the time. And then when cyber and military responses happen at the same time, there's only been 2, so 1.8 out of the 111 cyber incidents collected. So what we're seeing now is the rise of cyber espionage. And with the new data set that I've collected, the data set that I collected up in 2014, there's now 165 cyber incidents, and a lot of this is espionage. It's about the same level of disruptions and deceptions, about the same level, actually a reduced level of weaponry, but a big rise in cyber espionage campaigns, a lot of it coming from China, obviously. So the constant hacking seems to be reported every day are an intense demonstration of this and provide a stark reminder of how cyber technologies are used for effect by states and individuals alike. So cyber espionage, basically trying to define it, can be understood as the use of digital means to obtain secretive information from governments and other non-government entities, such as corporations. So a big chunk of the 111 cyber incidents that I collected up to 2011 are cyber espionage. So let's think about norms of cyber peace right now. So the big issue right now is China steals all our stuff. So China's stealing all our stuff. Why is this happening, and what do you do to prevent it? Well, obviously, we need to talk to China, and we need to come up with some sort of solution. But what we have to remember is there's a lot we can do defensively to prevent this in the first place. We do not have good policies in place. Did you know that the OPM still runs on Windows XP, and that the IRS still runs on Windows 98? And therefore, kind of putting this into perspective, if you're going to go out for the night and you leave your lights on, your door open, and you put a sign up saying, "Steal my stuff," people are going to steal your stuff. So I'm not saying that China's all to blame for this. We have to shore up our defenses. We're pretty technologically advanced. I think we can do these sorts of things. And then when we do that, we can talk norms in cyberspace. So when norms or expected modes of behavior are present and adhered to, these international actors are restrained from acting outside these normative structures. So cyber conflict is a particular situation of which existing international norms can, and based on our empirical evidence, are being applied by states. Some exceptions being Stuxnet. I think the United States actually is regretting launching Stuxnet against Iran because of what Iran's been doing in kind. And also there's a lot of confidence in the digital domain. We're putting all of our stuff online. We're banking online. We're shopping online. So there is some sort of trust within the digital domain that we shouldn't fear so much, but we need to be better at being more resilient at protecting ourselves. We can't expect that we can protect ourselves from 100% of all cyber attacks coming our way, but we need to be resilient enough where we can prevent as many as we can. Okay? So many might scoff at the idea of norms. In their basic sense, they can be effective means to control the basic behaviors of the majority of actors. There's always going to be deviance, but as long as we have clear systems of norms, deviancy will be seen as just that, out of that norm. So, in my opinion, what's the cyber future? I'll leave more of the future to the futurists. But militarizing digital, little room for civilian applications such as research, communication, education, and productivity. The internet's a great thing. We need it to be for this. Militarizing it will be stunning that. Given that we're in an era of stability and peace, how do we encourage it to endure? The simplest way is to maintain the attacks by states and not state actors alike on civilian populations are often they should be taboo. Also, institutions need to be built that might enforce these norms of non-action and cyber protection. And then finally, cyber states can be controlled and made safe. There are ways to do it. We need to get the people that know how to defend it in touch with the policymakers. Maybe that's what we can do. So to be aware of the possible escalation dynamics in each conflict, and to take in all the information as possible, not just relying on one source of perspective. So I do think there's hope in the cyber future. I do think that there's a developing norm happening, that states are learning that you can't be more overt. But I think it's way over time, so I'll stop at that and let the next speaker talk. So sorry.